This is the script, the podcast for screenwriters by screenwriters, the deepest story analysis anywhere on the internet. On the script, we believe story moves pages, story moves product, story moves people. Tonight, a special edition analysis of the film Contagion. I'm David Negrin. My screenwriters tonight are Alka, Khushalani, and Kristina Leath-Malin. I'm so happy to be back with you guys. I think we want to begin this podcast with a shout out to the first responders and frontline health workers in New York City, all over America, and all around the world. Alka, Kristina, how are you guys doing?
It's good. I mean, as good as can be expected. Like I was saying, I think, um, we're missing some things this year. My son's a senior in high school. He's not going to be walking for graduation. He's not going to prom. And, my daughter's in eighth grade, so they have their own graduation traditions, end of year traditions, and we're missing that. But other than that, you know, it's fine. We're in quarantine. We're, touch wood, healthy. We're doing good.
Yeah, well, that's a blessing.
Yep.
Kristina, how are you and yours?
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with Alka. My daughter's graduating elementary, and all of her senior activities are canceled too. But, it fluctuates each day, each minute. There's ups and downs. And I think through other tragedies, whereas you come together and you hug and you cry it out, this is a little bit rougher for people because it's an isolation situation. So you can't, except for the people that you're stir crazy with, you don't have the ability to run out to a bar and hug someone. So yeah, there are good days and bad.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to be back with you guys. I'm happy that I'm healthy and safe, and my loved ones are healthy and safe. And we're all New Yorkers, so I know we all know people who are going through rough times, either with health issues, with financial issues, and just the stress of this amazing time we're living through. So I think that's how you and I, all of you guys and I started talking about doing another pod about films that address um, the idea of virus outbreak, the idea of post-apocalypse, the idea of dystopian storytelling, and we started talking about what movies we could analyze, because this is what we do, and I think it's important in this time to keep doing what we do. We write, we analyze films, and sometimes we podcast and get together, and so I'm glad we're doing that.
For the
And
record,
yeah.
I hope that someone champions if we do something like Mars Attacks next. Just saying.
Well, what we discussed a bunch of things, right? We discussed doing Christina, you brought up doing something like The Road, which is a fully post-apocalyptic story. We talked about Train to Busan, which is a
Zombies.
zombie
Yeah.
apocalyptic.
Zombies,
Yeah,
zombies,
That is
zombies.
film
yeah,
101, right? Is we like to see ourselves projected on a screen. We like to see our human experience in this, particular format. And I think that is what is so powerful about watching or rewatching these films at a time like this, is that you really get that full experience, the full impact of what that experience means as a film person, as a writer, as a person in the audience. And we're living through this extraordinary time.
yeah. And it's also very interesting that because we're quarantined, we have a lot of not just film geeks like us, but the whole world is watching TV series and film thanks to streaming technologies. And Contagion, a 2011 film by Steven Soderbergh, who we all know very well, but he's, considered a bit of an indie director. The whole, the rest of the world doesn't know him. All of a sudden, Contagion shoots to the top of the charts because for some reason people want to watch a story about what it's like to go through a similar thing. And Kristina, when we started messaging about this, you said you started watching it and you're like, I'm afraid this is a little on the nose and a little triggering. And as I was watching, I felt the same.
Yeah, I don't, that laugh is kind of a nervous laugh. I honestly, I really love the approach that both you and Alka want to focus the podcast on, like purely script, structure, what about this screenplay? You just can't help but, as Alka said, a human story that is so apropos for the current times is going to be triggering, is going to hit a bone, is going to hit a nerve. Even if we talk about the structure, is it a 3-act, chronological, what is it? It's still, oh my God, this particular scene, it resonates. Things that resonate. I think that goes back to what Alka says. The more it resonates, the more you're interested. It's just emotionally, how strong are you to handle how close it may be to your own particular experience. So
I appreciate that. And I think, why don't we, normally we do a bunch of segments that are screenwriting related. Let's do our screenwriting format, analyze the film from a screenwriter's perspective. And then at the end, let's do a segment that's like a life imitates art segment. And let's discuss our closeness to this film and the experiences in this film and how they're similar to some of the things we're going through living in this time. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Ditto.
All right.
Work with that.
Why don't we do our classic one up and one down? Let's get into it. What's the greatest strength and the greatest weakness of this film from your guys' perspective?
Alka?
Okay, I will go first. I think I love that there are 2 inciting incidents in this film, right? So the inciting incident that we work with is Gwyneth Paltrow gets sick and she dies, right? That is really what kind of sets everything in motion. But at the end of the film, they go into the real inciting incident, which is the bat, the pig, to Paltrow. Do you know what I mean? And that is really, I think it's done really artfully. I think it's done really beautifully. And, it's one of those ways that, Soderbergh as a filmmaker kind of really makes this work as well. But I like it, and it's, in its script form, and I like how it's executed. So that is my one very strong up. Oh,
down.
One down. Are we doing
Please.
Like one? Okay. This is where I'm going to be very petty. I'm going to say I'm going to say 2 things about the down thing. Okay, we're going to begin with Jude Law's tooth. Jude Law, why does he have a crooked tooth? I mean, does anyone think like, oh, this is like this?
I have an opinion on this. Jude Law, even with the crooked tooth, is a whole snack, and we need to acknowledge this. Okay, that's my answer. He is just too good looking to be a fringe blogger character. The casting of Jude Law, he's like a god among men. He's one of the handsomest people I've ever seen in my life. Well, they had to do something to give him a little bit of like
so they gave him the
blogger edge, like the guy who lives in his basement thing.
But what same down, I think like what I think needed to be developed further and it's embodied in this character is this idea of misinformation. This is something certainly like we can get into in our life imitates art portion, but I think he deliberately misinforms. He pretends to have the illness and
and develop a cure for it.
And he has this like natural cure. He's anti-vax. There's something that's really, really compelling about this character. And I think it just it wasn't developed enough in a way that I felt was truly dangerous, because he was just a blogger. I mean, we are dealing with a president who is misinforming. Now those are stakes, you know? Whereas this, it's like, okay, he's a blogger. He's got, you know, he keeps informing us about his unique visitors.
That's very interesting. Yeah. Some blogger with 12 million followers, right?
Yeah.
What is
you feel it's dated right
Twitter?
there, right?
Yeah.
Bloggers were, you know, dangerous. I mean,
this was 10 years ago, right? So there's, 12 million probably is a lot back then.
Now you have Fox News. Now you have Donald J. Trump. So it's not enough, is my point with the down. Okay, Kristina's like she is gonna get me. What is she gonna do?
Not gonna get you.
Kristina, you're one up, one down, please.
One up, one down. Okay, so sticking to the film, my structural one up was how acutely they compartmentalize CDC versus WHO versus the government, and when the government steps in, can it be weaponized? And then we really see that it isn't so much about saving people, and this is probably real world, but as much as like, can this be used as a weapon? Do we have to stop real researchers from moving forward? The U of C professor moving forward on it, because now we need to keep it to ourselves as Americans, scared that it's going to be weaponized. And to think about that globally and how they showed that, portrayed that to us, makes me really think, you know, sometimes when we have cures, but we slow them down because we don't want guy A and guy B that are not part of the government, because we want to make sure it can be weapon. That blew my mind, structure story-wise. And I think I didn't, because I don't live in that world of CDC, WHO so deeply, unless there is an epidemic or a pandemic, that I didn't realize how much of a game of chess, you know, these types of situations can be for real world experience. That was totally my one up. My one down was fucking Hollywood machine. Of course, the bird, two parts to my one down. Of course, the bat to the pig to the casino. So this is all cultural one down with this. Fucking Hollywood with making Asians the villain again. They did it in Outbreak as well, starting with the whole Asian scenario about bad Asians, you know. I don't like that. I don't think, considering there are a lot of Asians that are being victimized right now, and in other instances, I don't think it was good that our A story, or the way I saw an A-B story, is like one story is the disease, one story is the Caucasian white perfect family, Matt Damon, that goes through all this hell. What about the fucking chef who was the first person to touch the pig? We don't hear anything about his story. No, this has to be a Caucasian family story that we put as a B story to the disease. And I don't like that it has to be the Gwyneth Paltrow that carries the whole story. The other half of that B one down is that although you like the secondary inciting incident, Alka, I hate it. I call it the Columbo. I call it the murder by death. If you've seen Murder by Death, where they keep telling you, and then this is how it all happened. Let me break down all of the blah, 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 blah. No, I hate that. I hate when you can't insert it into the film, but you have to, at the very end, give us this kind of whodunit, Hercule Poirot explaining of everything for us. The story was about the human experience. So whether it came from a bird or this or that, I think that secondary inciting incident really only pissed me off. So, and it wasn't about the bird, the bat and the pig. Yes, we know that we're going to die from something inevitably crossing with something else, something pooping someone else's mouth, but they didn't need that. And it wasn't really germane to the story that they had spent an hour and 46 giving us. So that was my secondary. It's always cultural with me. Fucking don't victimize minorities in my world. I hate that. And don't take away their B story. I would have loved if the story was about the chef and him going home, which he never came back up, and he's the first one to touch his coat in our end of the film montage. So
I think you really hit on something with the genre, and maybe after one up, one down, I was going to ask about genre like what genre are we playing in here? Because Soderbergh is known as originally an independent filmmaker, and a lot of his films have an independent voice. But then he has gotten very good at wrapping them in a Hollywood friendly structure, like of a thriller or a disaster film. And this surprise ending that gives us sort of the backstory on the backstory that you guys keep referencing, is, it's a twist. It's like a Hollywood twist. And yeah, does it have to do so much with the human stories in the film? Not so much. Does it have to do with how they found the cure? But I think
it satisfies.
It is. Yeah, it is satisfying,
and it is beautiful. It's not about like. I mean, I want to get into why it's like
Why is it satisfying? Like, if at the very end you showed
our need to know who did it, okay?
But,
how did this happen? Because they've gone realistically into the world of the pandemic. So it's like, as a viewer, you are very, it is a very satisfying ending.
And epidemiology is this that we get a taste of in this. This becomes a little bit of a procedural, story about what an epidemiologist does and how they investigate.
Right.
And that's part of the story. And like finding the index patient and things is a little bit about how they solve it, right? So I think it's satisfying in that, it opens with this day 2 and the population, and then day 14, and then day 16, and then doing a quick flashback to day 1.
But here's the question with that, getting that explained to you. Who really, let's be honest, who's patient 0? Who touches the pig? And, I feel like it's still, the story wasn't as indie because it didn't start with the chef. Why didn't we never hear anything about the chef? But he's patient 0 because he touched Gwyneth. But we're making the blonde Hollywood chick patient 0 for the story.
Listen, they don't respect Gwyneth Paltrow any more than Alfred Hitchcock respected the character of Marion Davies. Okay, sure. It is really a very interesting way they deal with her and with Kate Winslet. Talk about like fearlessly killing your darlings. You've got these. Okay, sorry, David. You were.
No, a lot of people have been calling this like that Gwyneth Paltrow like outbreak movie, and I think it's just because maybe she's a better known star. If this is anyone's movie, it's Kate Winslet's movie, right? She's the first scientist. Actually, it sort of weaves together the story of 3 women scientists, right? Starting with Kate Winslet, then Marion Cotillard at the WHO, and then the third woman who's at the CDC, who's finding the cure and eventually experiments on herself. Yeah. So to me, those 3 characters, they're kind of like all on the same plot line, even though each one of them, Kate's character gets ill and dies. Marion Cotillard's gets kidnapped in a fairly like very Hollywood kind of, we're going to kidnap you just so we have a kidnapping in this movie situation. And then the doctor solves the problem in the end. So I think, I was thinking
you see Gwyneth Paltrow's like skull, like they peel her skull down and they show it. She's not like kind of venerated as like this perfect, screen goddess. She is absolutely
no, but her world is definitely the B story. Her husband, her son, the daughter, the prom. I know, but I'm saying they go through each day of this narrative. There's always a Matt Damon scene or Gwyneth Paltrow scene or the daughter prom. That family is always in every day of the narrative. If you notice,
which I think is important. It's important to do the science story as the A story, the mission, and then a human story as the B story.
And so no other people do you really, except for Lawrence Fishburne with his wife, you don't see a family B that's fleshed out to any extent.
Okay, so I didn't get my 1-up, 1-down, but I'm going to speak to this. My 1-up for this was the human courage and vulnerability scenes in the middle of the scientific mystery, right? Yes, the Matt Damon family, the girl and the boyfriend being separated, they want to kiss. But then there is a Chinese official at one point who's talking about his mother has symptoms. Then we find out his mother later had been buried in a mass grave.
But they villainize that character. Remember when I said when they make them the kidnappers?
That's true. Yeah, he becomes the kidnapper, right? Which to me was very far-flung side plot. It has no place in this film. Dr. Cheever, who's played by Lawrence Fishburne, he's tempted to tell his girlfriend / wife that she should get out of town, and I think that was like a great like human conflict in the middle of this. Kate Winslet, when she's dying, you know, she's got this like guy next to her who's shivering, and her last you know, healthcare worker instinct is to give him her coat before she dies. So I thought just having a lot of that, all of those human moments in the middle of a science mystery is the strength of this film. It's the biggest strength for me. I think there are a few things that are very Hollywood that just, you know, sort of, I don't know, like the entire thing with the kidnapping and Marion Cotillard ends up in some village somewhere, and then, you know, 3 months later she's been kidnapped and she's like teaching the kids now. Like,
she's
what is
cool with it.
She's cool with the whole thing. Like that didn't make sense to me.
Even the reverse on the giving them the fake vaccines. I felt like that was just
this plays into a big plot point in this film. I disagree with what you guys have said. I just want to go on the record.
Well, it's definitely plot connected. But
not. I mean,
it all makes sense for the plot, but some of it feels out of the tone of, like, you didn't need it.
But the whole second
goes
half
back to
of
genre.
the film
Like, what does he do?
is about the haves and the have-nots of the pandemic. And that's exactly why
the village. So
that is exactly why this guy, who is kind of like, he's a scientist, he's her colleague, right? She is definitely senior to him. He's an Asian guy, but she's senior to him. She's with the World Health Organization. He is somebody who is local, and he really takes it on himself to save his village, right? And he's like, I know how this is going to play out. This was not misrepresenting Asians. I am an Asian woman. I'm going to say this was not misrepresenting Asians, because this is a guy who went in to this situation saying, I know exactly how this is going to play out. There's going to be a vaccine, and my people are not going to get it. So here's my insurance policy. That's why it's an important moment, and that's why it's like, it's the whole second half of this film hinges on this idea of a vaccine, of who gets it, how does this, you know, and it's like the Lawrence Fishburne character calling in Sanaa Lathan and telling her, don't freak out, don't tell anybody, but come to Atlanta now, get in the car. You know, it speaks to...
and the janitor overhearing it.
Yes. And all of those things happen because that is the theme of the second half, which is, okay, now you're in the thick of it. Now you're in it, and people are going to go crazy at the grocery store and the pharmacy. There is going to be misinformation. And then there are going to be tiers of those people, like people who are going to get it, people who are going to, you know, the vaccine, that is, people who are going to get in line like everybody else, and the people who are desperate.
I think what you're saying is makes so much sense. Now that you're bringing that up as a second half part, because I did feel the second half of the film, after the midpoint, is when the situation in the film, the stakes in the film are actually a lot worse than where we are in our lives right now with COVID-19. At the midpoint of this film, the movie, you know, the country tips into anarchy. There's a breakdown of social services, military enforcement of border quarantines. Nobody's picking up the trash anymore, right? Like, and so it's way worse. It becomes post-apocalyptic.
Matt Damon is in line for like food given out by the military, right? And I'm like, why is Matt Damon here? And that's how bad the situation is. Matt Damon's in line for food.
And he's trying to keep his virtue, like he helps some lady who falls over, but then he also storms the truck with the mob.
Okay, so here we go. I'm with that, and I feel like we are there now but it's, again, I feel like a Hollywood thing, and maybe I'm just like always gonna get mad about it. Like, poor Matt Damon, white guy in a wealthy suburb in line for food. But right now, in our real world, there are many parents that are not white and wealthy in suburbs that are going to schools where they're still giving out free breakfasts and lunches. So do we really need a scenario where we say poor white guy in the rich suburb reaching for food? Or do we maybe need to see a more urban, more realistic person that would be doing it? I feel like that's very stylized, so that we don't feel too awkward at seeing someone that's maybe Black or Latino or
Steven Soderbergh
Asian.
Is a formalist, okay? He is not a realist by any means. He is not making he hasn't made an indie film since Sex, Lies, and Videotape, which you could also say was very formal. You know, it was like, he is a formalist. That is what he does. He is not going to get down and dirty with anything.
Well, I think he probably said, I need to get Matt Damon in this movie, so I need some big names.
He always works with them.
Yeah, he always works with them. Also, Lawrence Fishburne and three, famous to semi-famous women actresses are the leads in the Ace story. So I think he was, for 2010, and for a white male cis filmmaker, this was pretty much the standard at the time.
But then I ask you this.
Not that we can't do better.
If we had all of your Caucasian Hollywood stars in the WCDC, and we had actually shown more of the real poverty level, would it made it more realistic to you? Like, I just feel like making the B story, poor white family in the suburbs, was a cop-out and wasn't as realistic as even the reporter, the newswoman who was pregnant. She had a couple of lines with Jude Law and then a picture memorial. And the one place where she asked him for the vaccine. That was an interesting storyline, a pregnant woman trying to get a vaccination, a Latino pregnant woman trying to get a vaccination. I thought that was but that was never going to be, for all of the family stories that got fleshed out in the pseudo family B to the disease A, the one that was the main fixture was the Gwyneth. And I would have loved if more of the non-cookie cutter stories that were little snippets here and there. Even Jennifer L, the E-H-L-E, Jennifer L. Yeah, even her with her dad, like their exchange. I loved all of
that scene. Made me crazy. Oh my God.
When she takes her mask off. Yeah.
I'm like, this guy's a doctor. He's coughing all over her. She's like just taking the vaccine.
See how you're connecting.
Vaccine. I was like,
that's what I'm saying. All of our all the baby Bs were much more interesting than the B they gave us.
Well, I think, Kristina, that is, that is the point, but that is not a Steven Soderbergh vehicle that you're talking about. That is something else. That is like, this is Steven Soderbergh's world. Yep. Even like the first few people who die, these are some good-looking people. Like they are.
Only hot people die first.
Only hot people on the.
Only hot people touch.
The woman who goes to London, she's like a supermodel.
It's bold for an Academy Award-winning actress to let her brain be torn open.
Like,
wait, rewind, guys. She was in 7. She was decapitated.
They never showed it. They didn't show what was in the box. What's in the box?
They showed what was in the box, David.
Was there?
What's in the box?
Maybe I look away.
I know what was in the box. Okay, I know it. Don't tell me they didn't show what was in the box. I saw what was in the box.
So let's just say Gwyneth is okay with having a little head work or head play or head.
She's fine with the head work.
Doesn't that make you a little happy? Like, okay, she is like, like mainstream Hollywood star. We saw like her head was like scooped out her head.
That's just badass effects. Let's not credit the effects.
Was there any gore in this that you liked, Kristina? Was there anything?
There's no gore in this. No,
okay. Was there anything effects wise that you thought was memorable?
You know what you guys didn't pick up on? Yes, her head was open, But you see how her tongue was nice and blue and it looked very rabbit-like. You should see it. Her two little teeth stuck out and her tongue was really, that was a very good effects head of Gwyneth. Like top to bottom, not just the head flip, but the tongue, it was a good job. But that wasn't acting, that was effects.
Did David get through his one up, one down? Are we just like the worst?
I did. I got through it.
We jumped on it.
We're just like railroading.
Yeah, I think what would be interesting to talk about now is the genre conventions. Was this a disaster movie?
No.
Was this a post-apocalyptic like survival film? Or was it an outbreak film? Is there its own genre, the outbreak film? What do you guys think?
It definitely was an outbreak film. Just because, like,
but then how do we define
before, during, after? It's adoring. It's kind of adoring. It's not after. It's not before. So it's not a post-apocalyptic. And it's not going to the point. But it's. I dare say we have to say there is a category for outbreak, pandemic type movies, because the far cry different from seeing Rock like swing on a vine and break through a 12-story building. You know, it's not Skyscraper. So they shouldn't be put in the same kind of, and I don't even think we should call it pandemic. I think it's just a drama, pandemic drama, but like, it's not action. There was no action. There wasn't any kind of like Jean-Claude Van Damme running around. So
it was a thriller. They were against the clock. Okay. They were working against a clock, right? It was built in like and they were in this film, they were showing us day 2, day 13. They kept showing us how many people were dying. So to me, when you build in a time clock from the beginning where, one of the basic definitions of thriller is that the antagonist is trying to kill the detective while they're solving the crime. That's exactly what's happening here, right? The virus is trying to kill Kate Winslet. It's trying to kill Lawrence Fishburne. Trying to kill all these people
but I think you're mistaking that for a structured timeline. It was more chronological. It wasn't like we have 8 days to save his life or her life. That was more just keeping you on track to say, like, this is how long it takes in the real world to solve this. It was a timeline. I didn't feel any urgency. I followed characters, I followed them emotionally, but I didn't feel any extreme urgency, like at this point it's all over or it's going to explode. And usually with thrillers, you think there's a moment of explosion if they don't meet this deadline by that time. There wasn't any kind
Kate
of by
Winslet
that time.
Dies. Like
a lot of people died. Like yeah. It doesn't, but it didn't. We didn't all just go, oh my God. We kept moving. So she wasn't the end all of the film, and there really isn't an end all.
I like how, he respected the real randomness of a pandemic, right? It felt very like grounded, right? Everything felt grounded, and now we are all experts, frankly, right?
Right.
We can say it felt very grounded in how he had no regard for the fact that he was killing off Gwyneth Paltrow. He was killing off Kate Winslet. And, it was, that was what was thrilling and good about it, was because he had this, he played with that landscape in a way that felt like, oh yeah, anything could happen, like you didn't know with Matt Damon and his daughter. I mean, he shows up to separate the daughter and the boyfriend with like a shotgun. And you're really thinking anything could happen because, he set up a movie where really like he's killing off people that you're like, oh, they would never, when you talk about film theory, like you always think, when you watch a Brad Pitt movie or you watch, any one of these big star vehicles, you kind of know, okay, he's not going to die. He's not going to be the one. And this movie doesn't really have regard for that, right? You're left even with the question of Lawrence Fishburne. Lawrence Fishburne gives up his vaccine dose.
Is that possibly too because we don't have a true protagonist?
Well, it's a multi-character, multi-plot.
Yeah, it's a multi-plot film. I think.
Multi-character, multi-plot. So
I do think we can draw a line through the 3 female scientists who are trying to. It's the CDC is Kate Winslet's. She's trying to stop the virus from spreading. And then Marianne Cotillard is trying to organize the effort,
WHO.
right, at the WHO at like a larger level, and then the scientist is trying to find the vaccine itself. So in a way, those three women's characters are sort of one large.
There is a line. Yeah, that's a really good
they're like
point,
one
David.
large protagonist.
Jennifer and Kate are both CDC. It's just one's in the field and one's more hands-on with the virus, right?
Yeah. And
One's a scientist and one's an investigator. So one's like a detective and one is a scientist.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it's a multi-plot film, and you're killing off like main characters, and I think they're sort of passing the torch between the three medical investigators in this case. But then we do get a few, subplots. We get the family subplot with Matt Damon. We get the blogger subplot with Jude Law. Am I forgetting any of those subplots? With the Marianne Cotillard kidnapping. Yeah.
Yeah, with him and his family.
Small village. Yeah. And the janitor,
what is Bryan Cranston doing there?
Oh yeah, he was the rear admiral. I feel like, actually, Kristina made an allusion to this earlier about she was interested in the intrigue between all the organizations, and I forgot to mention the name of the screenwriter for this. Usually we do that at the top.
Oh, yeah.
But it's directed by Steven Soderbergh, but it was written by Scott Z. Burns, who wrote The Bourne Ultimatum, The Laundromat, and The Report, which is very recent. So he is a political thriller guy, and so the fact that I think you latched onto some of the political intrigue makes sense. I liked it too.
I that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to see that again. It feels like to me there were, if we take it, we don't make it cultural, so we don't say it's an Asian villain thing, then again we've gone back to that Hollywood. The government is the villain because they're the ones that are trying to suppress any other researchers from helping the CDC when they're scared that it can be weaponized, which I think is kind of a lazy thing, and that's why we're like humph on Bryan Cranston, because we know he's a stunning, phenomenal actor, but here they just have him as this cookie cutter. You can't do that. Give us all the stuff. Don't share it with anyone. And we know that. We've done that a million times with Tom Cruise. So having a government villain kind of scenario, I think is lazy. But it might be truthful. It's just...
I mean, it's interesting, though, that there's no president, right?
No, we didn't really bring him into that.
Lawrence Fishburne, the CDC is doing all the briefings, right, Alka?
They love these institutions, right? You can definitely feel like the heroes are coming from this well, right? Yes. Whether from the WHO or the CDC, and it really kind of, it really respects those organizations. I mean,
Wait, what if it's not that we have a person that's a protagonist? What if the CDC as an organization is the protagonist?
I mean, pretty much. That's where all the investigators are coming out, or the health organizations, the health bureaucracy, because even when they go to Minnesota, they're not talking to the governor of Minnesota, it's the Minnesota Health Department.
DOH, and the DOH are total dicks. About, yes. Well, I don't want to get them. This is Thanksgiving weekend. We can't do this. Every time the government steps in, they're dicks.
Well, but no, in that case, what I was saying is not that they're dicks, but they were dealing with the health professionals in every case. It was never a governor. It was never a president. It was always because, Soderbergh and the screenwriter took for granted with their, scientific consultants and their epidemiology consultant, who, by the way, was like on the news a couple of weeks ago because he has COVID-19, all assumed that the people at the podiums and making the decisions would be doctors and scientists, right? If there's one thing that was naive about this film, is that there wasn't more of a Bryan Cranston sort of takeover of everything.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I was too busy saying
the leadership portion, whether it was, in the positive light, like this is what you need to do, or whether it was in a negative light, which was like represented by Jude Law and spreading that misinformation. Like these were the two, and I don't know if we hadn't lived through this, whether I would feel this way, but these were the two like real weak points, because it was so kind of, but that also mirrored mirrors our experience now, in that we are kind of like, we don't know where to turn, you know? So maybe that's a piece they got right too. It's just, you know, when something like this happens, we become like this headless monster that kind of doesn't know where to go.
Well, just think about it from a writer's aspect, and I'm still latching on to the government versus the health organizations, exchanges in dialogue. If we look at it via the Obama administration with swine flu, as a writer, I would say this is a little lazy because it makes a contentious scene between DOH and the organizations, very contentious. And I would think to myself, Obama would probably try his best to work, or an administration under Obama would try their best to work. So that dialogue would be like, I really see what you're doing, but how can we make this better for the people while protect? That's the way I would see the dialogue going to be its strongest. And then the dialogue we have before us is the contentious. But if we put this same dialogue against the Trump administration, it seems right on the nail. Like, you're idiots. We're not. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Just we have to protect ourselves. So in a way, the way the fight for lack of better words right now, the dialogue fights the dialogue fights each other is very fitting with our current administration, and it seems very truthful. Whereas it seems like lazy if we compared it to our past administration. So it's like, how do you perceive it? In my mind.
Yeah, well, I think these filmmakers assumed science in a health pandemic, in a health emergency. The deciders would be scientists. And that's a very liberal, progressive assumption to make. And it's, you know, in looking at our current situation, it's really interesting. Although, you know, there are you know, people like Dr. Fauci, who's now sort of a celebrity, you know, for being this doctor, this health guru who's navigating the politics of the current moment the best he can. And we hear about governors in other states sort of putting up with insults from Trump because they don't want to lose access to resources. I think that would be an interesting higher stakes dimension to the plot of the film. I just don't think they could have imagined it. I don't think they imagined, you know, like so many, a Trump-like figure.
Yep.
Oh, did you also notice, not to segue off of that, but like I feel like the in your like a 3-act structure, they use montages to kind of break up and move us to like the next stage. Like the montage in the beginning, and then a montage with Marianne Cotillard where she does, and then another montage before we went into who gets the vaccines again with Marianne. And I'm like, that I don't know. I really would love to hear, because you guys probably know a lot more than I do about Soderbergh as a director and what his antics are with his visualizations and some things that are typically Soderbergh in your opinions.
Yeah, I picked up on something that he does a lot. Soderbergh shoots a lot. He's usually behind the camera himself, and so I think he shot. If let's say there are 7 plots in this film, if you separate all of the scientists, I think he probably shot, you know, an hour's worth of story for each of them. The entire Marianne Cotillard montage, where she's like figuring stuff out, I was like, that's like it was shot in multiple locations. Like that was way too much time. They shot that whole thing. Soderbergh usually puts together a first assembly of his edit that's like 6 hours long. And then he just works to cut it down. And so a lot of his films end up this way, montagey very moving from place to place, and no one story explored very deeply. A lot of stories that are connected explored, to a superficial amount. So I think this is on par for him.
Yeah, I think it's probably for me his most successful film um, since like Sex Lies and Videotape. Like I think these are the two things that for me personally I have enjoyed of his, because I find that sometimes he does kind of make me not care. There's something too formal in his work for me, as you know, my taste. But this is good. This is really, I think there is, in spite of the fact that we have multi-character, multi-plot, like um, this kind of, we have this momentum that's kind of unrelenting. I think there's a lot of heart here, you know? There are these moments of heart, like he sticks it in with Jennifer Ely and her father. That scene made me crazy. There was this scene with John Hawkes, right? And Lawrence Fishburne, where Lawrence Fishburne is giving John Hawkes' son his dose of the vaccine.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he explains to him, like, do you know where the handshake comes from? The handshake comes from, you know, showing somebody that you are not armed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very, you know, it's just like so human, this like small little moment in the greater, you know, panorama of this movie that is just like, there are these moments of real human connection, of real, like, you can feel the love among these characters. And
That's
that
where
is
this
the
movie
trick of
succeeds.
this movie. Is I don't think Soderbergh does that particularly well, but this is like really heartfelt.
I I want to second that. I saw an interview on a Netflix series called Off Camera with Matt Damon, where they knew in the script where Matt Damon's character finds out that his wife is dead. Matt Damon talked in the interview about how they discussed, how are we going to do this? Are we going to do the cliche where he just breaks down like dramatically crying in the middle of it? Or will we do the hand on the wall, he called it. He's like, what's that? He's like, you do a shot that's like really far away and all you see is over quiet, no voiceover. You just see the doctor mouthing some words and then the husband's hand goes to the wall like in agony. And they discussed it, I think, with doctors. A doctor who had said, they asked the doctor, what is it like to have to tell people that their loved one has died? And the doctor's response was, most of them can't process it. Like, you have to stay with them for several minutes and say it again and again because it's too big a thing. And so that human moment of Matt Damon, like, where he's like, your wife is dead. He's like, yeah, but can I see her?
That was a powerful moment.
Yeah, like that stuff. That's the kind of stuff you're talking about, right, Alka? Like,
yeah, that
he didn't even say, "Can I see her?" He's like, "Can I talk to her?" And I was just like, I felt awkward. Like he didn't just hear that, did he? It was a great moment. I will give you that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like most people remember that prom moment, right? That prom moment always felt kind of a little forced, sentimental and kind of a little OTT for me. But this moment was so genuine. Like, yeah, but can I just go talk to her? Or the handshake thing, I
like the handshake thing. That was great.
And it was like these two worlds.
It was like advice a grandfather would give to a grandson, like,
But no, but it was also like so within that theme. It was so tight with the theme of now who gets it. Now is like where the haves and the have-nots. It's like Lawrence Fishburne is like a suit, and I think John Hawkes is like, is he a parking
janitor? He's a janitor.
Like he's definitely blue collar, white collar. You know what I mean? Yeah. And these two people just connecting as humans and kind of moving beyond that idea, but it's still like as a written document, it's so tight within this theme, where this guy is, really crossing a line. right? He's crossing the line to give this kid his vaccine. It's just like,
To me, that's what we can take away from a film like this at a time like this, right?
Agreed.
and you hope
You know,
that there are people like that. You hope that there is a scientist who's just injected herself with, the COVID-19 vaccine, and she is
well,
going to push it
we
through.
know for a fact that there are nurses and doctors putting their life at risk every day right now just by going to work, right?
Yeah.
They don't have to be experimenting with a vaccine on themselves. They're already doing this right now in New York City. That 7 p.m. applause, gives me goosebumps every time I see a video of it. And so yeah, we do have
So
heroes.
explain for somebody who doesn't know what's going on, David.
Oh yeah, a lot of people don't.
Well,
They don't know what the 7
it started
p.m.
in
thing is.
Italy, right? But at 7 o'clock in New York City every night, there is in the streets across from the hospitals, from the windows, and anywhere in the city, you can hear an applause, a banging of pots, all in tribute to the healthcare workers, the doctors, the first responders, who we know are fighting this antagonist right now, all day, 24/7.
And for a lot of us, like, who live in apartment buildings, and we're all kind of in our own little bubbles. I don't know which of my neighbors are home. I don't know. And for that one moment at 7 p.m., I hear them. I hear my neighbors. I'm like, oh, they're still there, And it's nice. It's a really nice communal, it's like a celebration every day that there are people who are doing really fine, good, God's work,
Yeah. I mean, why don't we finish up by talking about how life imitates art? Like, what did this movie remind you of? What did it get right or wrong that you're going through right now, or that you know someone who's going through right now?
I'll start off by saying that, as of course you two know, that I had a lot of trepidations about doing this tonight because I am in Brooklyn, and for those of us along with Alka and David, you were a Brooklynite. It's a dense borough. All of the boroughs are dense, and we've been hit pretty hard. And I just wasn't sure how close to home this is, considering I have friends that are in the trenches in the healthcare profession, and I have that are getting, the pots and pan salute every 7 p.m. And I have friends that have lost people, at the first week feels like especially with your kids home, it feels like a snow day. And then, now we're in the third, fourth week, you can't help, especially in this town, to not be connected to someone that's had a loss close to them. So this movie, I think, for all that in it that might be triggering to some, is really good, especially for what Alka brought up in those poignant human moments that ground us in the fact that, there is love, there is kindness, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel, regardless of the administration, that there are people working to find the end of the tunnel. So I think that was my takeaway.
Alka, what's been real for you?
I think, I want to talk about it in terms of script structure also.
Yeah.
So I was watching this film and I was kind of trying to pinpoint, where are we now, right? And there's really no way of knowing, exactly where we are. We are 4 weeks into a quarantine, for the record.
You mean where are we according to the movie?
Yeah,
okay, where are we?
If our lives were the arc of this film,
mm-hmm.
right? Let's go to that. Where are we now?
Yeah.
Right. I was really thinking about it as I was
thinking about it through the whole film too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, so we're at the point where we have a certain amount of chaos still, like you do in the first act. We have a vaccine that's been worked on by maybe, I don't know, between 8 and 12 companies, I think, are working on a vaccine.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to guess. I think what was making me nervous about this was that second act. So let's talk about the midpoint of this film was really a number of scenes where you understand the theme that they're going to explore in the second half, and that is who gets this vaccine. Okay, so the vaccine is coming, the vaccine is being worked on, and it is kind of explored in this Marion Cotillard's kidnapping. Kate Winslet is moved.
The lottery, and
well, it's also the lottery, but it's like in the midpoint, right? It's like Marion Cotillard's colleague, her Asian colleague, is like, I know how this is playing out. I'm taking you with me as my insurance policy. Okay. Kate Winslet, they're trying to move her. I mean, they move her to a special hospital, but they're trying to bring her back, and she gets usurped.
Yeah. You mean she
and
does.
You know, like Lawrence Fishburne is calling his fiance home. So there are all these things that are probably, you know, we've passed that. I felt like we've had that moment where, you know, like you heard about the senators selling their stocks, and you've heard about, you know, the mass graves, and you've heard about, you know, so I feel
Celebrities paying for testing, right?
Yeah, the test that nobody else seems to get.
Right.
So we're kind of past that, but I don't know how far we are from that, because right at this moment we are, we're waiting for Dr. Fauci, the head of the CDC, to kind of say to us, this is the date. This is the date. We're going to move forward. We're going to go back to something resembling our lives before, you know? And I don't know when that's happened. You know, today is a day, like we started in the opening of our podcast, kind of saying, like, today was the day that Bill de Blasio, our mayor in New York City, came out and said, we are not going back to school for the rest of the year. So it does not feel like that part is closed, like that part where you either get some kind of respite, or you get some kind of treatment, or you get some kind of vaccine, or something where somebody tells you, okay, on this date, you can walk out of your house and go anywhere you want to go. So we're somewhere beyond the midpoint, but who knows where. That's the way I would put it.
But the other thing,
I don't know if we are, but go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. I was going to say that I felt the same, you know, the same way, you know, trying to figure out where we are according to this movie. And in the second half of the movie, shit gets way worse than where we are, right? Because the country goes into anarchy, and at one point they mentioned the mortality rate of the virus in Contagion is like mid-20s, like, so that's way worse than the COVID-19 mortality rate. Like, this is like killing 1 out of 4 people who get it, which is way worse than COVID-19. And also, you know, the number of people who are getting it, you know, in the film ends up being, you know, in more like the Spanish flu numbers, like 40 million, 60 million, 80 million. So I just kept wanting the movie to get worse, so that it would be worse. It would be way, you know, it would make me feel better about where we are. But what didn't get worse, what, you know, we are in the isolation, and we are in the same amount of fear, and we are experiencing these losses, this kind of like slow loss of our freedoms, our high school graduations, our proms. As a teacher, I'm, you know, like teaching remotely now. A lot of teachers are losing their jobs. A lot of people, all kinds of people are losing their jobs. Our economy is going in, you know, into an emergency state. And so you know, there are some things that aren't in this film that we're
That is not
experiencing.
in this film, and that is a huge concern, and
Yeah.
certainly the major concern of our leadership at this moment.
Well, that's that, and I'm going to tap into that as well. I know we're trying to conclude this, but the biggest problem is that I feel, and I'm not taking us down a dark spiral about the current administration, but I think other administrations, just like Burning Man has done recently, would try to project an end date to give some sense of hope and some sense of organization about like what we can look forward to what you said, Alka, and we don't have that.
What did
So
Burning
even
Man do? Did they
they
postpone?
made the call yesterday to make it a virtual event.
Oh, it's going to be a virtual event. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So, and even that tells me, okay, I'm not going to buy a plane ticket, or you know, or I can start to rejigger my thoughts on this particular aspect of my life. But we haven't really gotten that from our government, except for De Blasio. But like, we need it on a bigger scale. In this movie, they get that. I feel like that's why we're not at the midpoint in this. We are not at the midpoint of the movie, because at least they got vaccinations, and it came down to, we only have 400,000 and there's this many million, but at least they had it. We're not even at that point yet, you know?
I had the finding of the vaccine by the third scientist as the break into the third act for me. That's what I had. I didn't have it as the midpoint. I had when she finds the vaccine as the beginning of that. Her choice to inject herself was like
I had that same point.
part of the low point, and
Yeah.
so then there's a cut from that scene with her and her father, where we're all like, no, you're like, all the other scientists are dying, like, don't do this. And she's like there with that beautiful moment with her father, and her father's like, and she tells this story about the doctor who figured out that there was a bacteria that caused stomach ulcers, and he experimented on himself, and then he got a Nobel Prize for it. And he, you know, the doctor father who's sick is like, you know, gets teary because he's thinking, oh, maybe his daughter is going to get the Nobel Prize. So to me, that was the beginning of the third act, and then the third act was,
I agree with that completely, David. That's exactly what I had.
a lot about the third act conflict was what you guys have said already, is that who gets it and who doesn't, right? And getting back to life. This film doesn't end with life back to normal. The film ends.
But the prom was supposed to be that kind of giving you Hollywood closure with the pseudo prom in the house.
And the kid shows up with his wristband.
With the wristband, and they have a prom, so that's supposed to tell you your Hollywood norm is that she could have a little prom in her house.
I like that. I liked it. I thought it was good because they're not out of it yet.
Yes, I think that was a good. I mean, it was a little maudlin. Okay, it was a little overly, you know, whatever, manipulative. But I think it is that thing that kind of tells you, like, yeah, just, you know, her name will be drawn. She'll get her vaccine. And I like that they gave us this, I don't know how fast vaccines work also. That was another concern I had watching. Like, that dude showed up, like, he got his vaccine, and 2 seconds later he was like, baby, I'm home. And and same thing with Jennifer Ely with her dad. Like, she just injects herself and she walks right in, he coughs in her face, and she's like, no problem, right? So, you know,
to me, that's, you know, this is actually appropriate that we are left thinking about how long are we going to have to be inside? How long till we get our vaccine? You, Alka, you, Kristina, our families, how long till we get ours, right? You know, and
I mean,
that's kind of where we are now.
Yeah, and there is like a lot of talk about a vaccine that was already delivered in Asia, because in Asia there are fewer cases per capita, and there was a vaccine that actually I received because I was born in India, and they're finding that people who had this vaccine they have this immunity. I'm not testing
Is this
it.
a
I'm not.
conspiracy theory, or is this
No,
real?
this is real. And so in
Okay.
Australia, they've started to administer this vaccine.
What was the vaccine for? It was for
It's
some
called
other
BCB.
disease.
It's for tuberculosis, which when I was born
Is it called forsythia?
it was not.
You're wrong.
It was not called forsythia. And
She's not Jude Law. She doesn't have a gap. Just stop it.
Jude Law did not administer.
We almost
this
got
vaccine.
away with conspiracy theories on this podcast.
No, it's true though. There is something called BCBG or BGBC, something like that.
For tuberculosis?
It was given to children as part of their regular inoculations, part of their regular
Alka, if
schedule.
FBI come to your door tomorrow morning, don't wonder
We are
why.
podcasting live.
I don't know
Watch
why.
out.
I inform you. I tell you what I know, and this is what I get. And you know what I feel like? I feel like a character in this movie. And that is also, but that said, that is something. Speaking of forsythia, we have not touched upon the glorious score by Cliff Martinez. Can we just give him a little shout out? This is gorgeous music. This is really perfect music. It captures, like, when they're in Asia, he captures like Asian kind of, melodies and stuff without ever losing the thread of what he is doing. And it's really gorgeous. It's one of the, I'm going to just confess, I use this as writing music from time to time, the soundtrack to Contagion. And I have for many years, and I bought it a long time ago.
Is that your meditation writing music?
Things, like I just put it on. Like there's certain.
Okay, certain things you mean use this for sexy music, don't you? Just admit.
Contagion.
Certain things.
No.
Certain things. Yeah. No, Cliff Martinez has a great score for Traffic as well. I don't know.
Oh, there we go.
He was one of Soderbergh's earlier films. So.
This is one of the tops, in terms of original music. It's beautiful.
Do you guys have any last comments? Anything you didn't get to say on the podcast? Something you want to say to the world, about the film, the filmmakers, about pandemic movies, living in a pandemic?
It's very funny. I just want to put it out there that I literally have the film up on my secondary screen, and I've stopped it at 56 minutes and 51 seconds. And the funniest screenshot, which I'll share in a bit, is a stand full of Purell. And I just think it's so apropos in the current times.
This movie got so much right.
Right.
Really, really. And they're, and that's the thing that I think I am also struck by is how many times we have heard, and administrations have heard, and governments have heard that this is the thing that could have taken us down. People have been ringing the alarm on the pandemic for I don't know how many years, how many books have been written, how many people have been kind of, in using various platforms, been talking about this very thing. And, we all kind of were like, yeah. I mean, even...
It's okay.
This movie was 10 years old. This movie's 10 years old.
All of the stuff that we've kind of Ebola, it was kind of like, that can happen, but it hasn't played out like this since 1918.
This movie's 10 years old, and I read an article about what did Contagion get right and what did it get wrong, and it's like 95% right. There's a couple of things in this movie, like they mention the phrase social distancing in the film.
Yes, they do.
Doing it in the film, because we are now experts on what social distancing looks like. Right?
I don't know.
So it's not. So that's like one thing they didn't get right. But they talked. This film got so much right, talking about the concept of the R naught, like the reproductive rate of the virus, the concept of not having enough hospital beds, the concept of surface transmission, the formite transmissions or whatever they're talking about, how many times we touch our face, even that plot point where the government shuts out the lower level lab. The CDC says only biosafety level 4 labs can do this work. This actually happened. Cool. This actually happened with the coronavirus test. It happened. It's why one of the reasons it started rolling out in America so slow, and why other countries roll it out so fast, is the CDC had to have the higher level national labs create the test so that they could have control. Was that a health decision or was that a bureaucratic decision? I don't know. Was it good or bad? I don't know. But this movie predicted it. This movie predicted it.
Yeah.
And it was
you can 100% see the words being said in the current administration. Can it be weaponized? No, but I'm saying military usually thinks like that, so it makes a lot of sense.
I thought in this film they were asking, was it weaponized? More like, is this a terrorist attack? Rather than, we can use this against the bad guy. No, the guy says those exact words. I wrote that quote down. And the whole idea of shutting down Elliot Gould, even though he's the one that, I think he's the one that found the third strain, was the idea that we want to have control of. I'm going to be an Alka right now with her saying she's got a vaccination on her hands. I'm going to say live that I'm deadly afraid, and I pray that it's not the truth and I'm speaking out of tongue, but that the current administration plans for a vaccine to go wide closer to election time to look like a hero. That's what makes me very afraid, that it's strategic and it's not for the welfare of the people. That's what makes me terribly afraid right now. Yeah. I think it's amazing that this film, if this film had a president or a politician using the global pandemic for political manipulation and victory, we would have said, this is such bullshit.
We would have called it crap. Yeah, we would have said that would never happen. Number one, we never elect someone that,
we wouldn't have believed it. And so that's another part that's important, a reason for us to reflect on this film, is to say, look at the things they got right and look at the things they couldn't even imagine that are happening now.
Well, I will also add to that and talk about fears going forward with another Jude Law observation. Kristina, get your head off your desk.
A tooth comment.
The deal with Jude Law that is also really important is that he kind of represents that anti-vax movement. And, I am afraid that there will be a new resurgence. Like, say there's a vaccine, there's going to be all these people coming out of the woodwork saying it's dangerous. And there'll be a new wave of misinformation and God knows what else. That is what it...
I think you're right. I think all the conspiracy theories and sort of reflex... what do you call it? The more time you're in a isolation and the longer we're in this quarantine situation, the more people are going to go stir crazy, the more they're going to want to act and do something, because we all want to do something about this, but we can't. The more that you're going to find fringe people, and insecure or scared or fearful people, creating conspiracy theories or maybe acting towards them. There's already examples of, hoarding food, of trying to sell, products for, Purell for $40 and things like that. So yes, and maybe we can end on this. Yes, there are people who are going to take advantage of this situation, but there's also there are heroes out there who are, running towards the danger and showing us what humanity can do and what we can do, not just in fiction, but in reality. Last thoughts?
No, that was perfect.
Perfect.
Guys, it's so good to see you.
Yeah, same here.
I'm glad that you
we
guys
got the band back together. Even if
it's good to
a
get the band back
quarantine to
together.
do it.
We have to talk about what would be next in our pandemic edition. Horror. Let's go more dystopian, more apocalyptic, because then it's less close to home. But thank you guys for inspiring this, and thanks for watching a movie that made you feel
in my feelings.
Yeah, it was difficult. It was really close to home.
Yep. Yep.
Thank
you, David. Thanks for having us. And you know, it was good to actually like think about something in a, you know, something like this in a critical way, in a narrative way. That was really, you know, that was the upside.
All right, guys. I want to thank Kristina and Alka. You can join our Facebook page by searching for NYC Screenwriters Collective. You can follow us on Twitter at ScriptFeed. You can email us with questions and comments and complaints at scriptfeed@gmail.com. I'm David Negrin. Now go set a timer for 10 minutes and write something until the timer goes off.
I'm down for that.